Hello, I am going to be showing you how to use Adobe Lightroom so you can begin to edit your pictures on a professional level, and we're going to be heading into Lightroom right now. The very first thing that I'll be doing is that I'll be searching for Lightroom on my PC right now. This is what Lightroom interface looks like. So when you open Lightroom, you'll pretty much see the picture that you just saw coming up. This is a project that I was working on earlier, but we're going to be getting rid of this, so ignore this. Basically, the first thing that you see when you open Lightroom is just this interface. So you're going to be seeing on the top menu here these 7 options: library, develop, map, book, slideshow, print, and web. You don't need to worry about all the other options that are there. The main one that you'll be using are library and develop. If you want to get into map, book, slideshow, print, and web, this is not the video for you, sorry. Next thing, on this side, you'll basically be seeing like your navigator, your catalog, your folder, collections, and published services. Only thing here that you'll be using are basically your folders, your collections, and your navigators. And at the bottom here, where all these pictures are, these are basically all the pictures that you've imported into Lightroom, and those are the pictures that you're going to be editing. So that's why I have all these pictures all at the bottom here. Those are what I've been working on for this project here before. And over here, you're going to be seeing the drop down menu for your library, and if you click develop tool, you're going to be seeing your drop down menu for your develop. Of course, you can click on this arrow here and it will expand all the other options that are there for you. So the first thing that we want to be doing when we get into Lightroom is to import the pictures that we're going to be editing. So you can do that in either one of 2 ways. You can go to files, import photos and videos, or you can go to wherever your pictures are and you can select the folder. You can drop the entire folder, or you can select all the pictures that are in the folder and basically drag it into Lightroom, and we'll be working with the latter option here. So I selected my pictures that I want to import into Lightroom, and basically what I'm going to be locating to those pictures, and I'm going to be dragging all those pictures into Lightroom. Easy peasy. You should be able to do that in less than 2 minutes. So when you import all your pictures into Lightroom, you're going to be seeing all the pictures that you've imported all here. Let's say, for example, you're in Kevin's class and you basically select all the pictures that you've taken for that day, and you want to import all the pictures. You highlight all the pictures and you drag them into Lightroom. You're going to be seeing that all the pictures are selected here and the option for all photos are ticked. Let's say you do not want to import all the pictures. You're going to untick the all photos option, and you're basically going to be selecting all the pictures that you want to import so you can begin editing. This is just a filtering process so you can actually begin to start editing the pictures. But I selected these pictures because I want to show them for the purpose of this video how you edit each pictures individually. Let's say you have just the grid here with all your pictures, and you want to see the pictures before you import it so you can begin editing. What you can do, you can double tap on the picture that you want to see before selecting it, or you can go to the picture and press E, the letter E on your keyboard, and it will magnify the picture for you. So I selected all these pictures, as I said before, because I'm going to be using them for the purpose of this video. So next thing that I want to do is that I'm going to be importing all the pictures that I selected, so that I can begin the editing process. So what you're going to be doing is just selecting the import option at the bottom of the screen right here. So I'm just going to click import. And what you're going to be doing is fetching the initial previews. So it's just going to be randomly going through the pictures that you selected. And then all of the pictures that you selected will be coming down here so you can see them and click on them to begin the editing process, as I said before. So these are all the pictures that you've imported. what you're going to be doing to start the editing process is to select the picture. Then you'll see that the picture that you selected will come here, and then you can begin the editing process. Congratulations, you've made it past step 1. Step 2, you're going to be getting into actually editing the picture. Now we're going to be resorting back to what you saw here, the library and the develop tool. These are the main two options that you're going to be using to edit your pictures. When you click on the library tool, over here you will see the basic options that are going to be using to begin set the stage for what your picture is going to be looking like. First thing that you see over the right hand side of the panel here is your histogram. What the histogram does is basically shows you all the light options that are in the pictures. It shows you the different colors and it shows you where the picture has the most light. So on the histogram here, you can see that the most light or the most exposure you'll hear in class is on this side of the picture. So all this section is really overexposed because you can see that the y-intercept is actually peaking to the top of the histogram, so your light is getting all the way up here. So it's actually hitting the top of the histogram, so that side is really bright. We can begin to do that by adjusting the settings that we're going to be discussing in the following few steps. So we're not going to be using the histogram very much, but just a pretty intro of what it is. I'm going to be using this option here to basically collapse the histogram panel because we're not using that. This is where most of the work will begin to develop. So we're going to be using the quick develop option. What the quick develop option does, it shows you basically just a quick way in which you can begin to start editing the pictures in a very light way. And for you to get onto advanced settings, then we'll go into the develop option right after we finish the quick develop. So basically what you're going to be doing for the quick develop is that when you take a picture and the picture is like really warm in the tone of the picture, like say the picture is really yellow or the picture is very fluorescent in a way, you can begin to change the white balance. We learned about that in class. So when you select the white balance, you can either set it to when you shot the picture or you can change it to auto. With the auto, you're going to be using the default way in which the computer detects how the light or the exposure on the picture is, so it can best select the settings for you. So if I select auto, you'll see how the picture changes. It has more of a blue tone to it. Look, as shot, that's how the picture was. As auto, that's how the picture came out. But you can decide which of these is what you want your picture to look like. Photography and editing is a very subjective thing, so you have to do based on what you think looks best for your image. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be using the auto option because I feel like the blue tone is really what sets the picture because you're getting the reflection from the sky above. Next is the exposure panel. When you take a picture and the picture is really underexposed or overexposed, you can use the exposure panel to turn down the light or the exposure on the picture, or you can increase exposure on the picture. What I'm going to be doing right now is basically decreasing the exposure by a stop. We learned about stop in class, I'm not going over that again. So I'm just going to be turning down the exposure here by one stop. Just that one. It turns down the exposure just a bit. With this option right here, you begin to expose the decrease the exposure by one stop. With this, it's 1/3 of a stop. I didn't want to decrease it one stop because it gets extremely dark like this. So what I did was that I exposed it by 1/3 of a stop. You can begin to tweak around with the settings to see what best suit the image. Here next we have our clarity. What the clarity does is basically increase the clarity of the image. So it begins to let the picture be a bit more clear, the colors start to begin popping, it's a bit more vibrant, and that is what the clarity tool does. If I decrease the quality as I'm doing here, the clarity as I'm doing here, you can begin to see that the image starts to get a little washed out. So we want to ensure that all the elements of the picture are really clear and popping. So we increase our clarity. Next, we have the vibrance tool. The vibrance tool basically does similar things that the clarity does, but it brings up more of the color. So when you increase the vibrance, you can see that all the tones and all the colors that are in the picture starts to be a bit more rich. But you should be very careful with the vibrance setting, because it can make your picture look a bit artificial or very much unrealistic. So we want to be very careful with the vibrance tool. So those are the main three settings that you're going to be choosing to set the tone for your image in the develop panel. Next, when you've become comfortable with what your eyes are seeing in your picture based on your subjective views of what looks good, then you can begin more advanced setting. We're not going to be touching the keywording and the keyword listing or metadata or comments. Those are for mainly exporting purposes, like you want to add a comment to your picture, or you want to change a certain setting or bit rate or anything like that. Then you begin to choose any of those options. We're not getting into that. Okay, then we're going to be moving on to our develop panel. What the develop panel does basically is select more advanced setting, as I said prior. So this is where most of the work is done, and where you have to be the most careful when it comes down to your image. This is just a picture of a fish, so there's not much to change, there's not much to tweak, and you want the fish to be looking as realistic as possible. So we're not going to be using any severe settings that will actually make the pictures look like robotic or disgusting in any way. So we're going to be very careful with our settings here. In the develop panel, you'll basically find your basic settings. That changes the exposure of the image, the contrast, the vignette, the color grading, the white balance. Just a bit more advanced setting than the develop tool. On your tone curve, what this basically does is sets the exposure of certain parts of the image, or the black or white of the image. For the tone curve, you can expose the tone of the image, which are the white or the blacks, by increasing the whites or decreasing the whites, or increasing the blacks or decreasing the blacks, depending on how the image looks. We're not going to be touching the tone curve because as I said, I don't want the image to be looking like artificial and the fish looking unrealistic, so we're going to ignore that setting. For the HSL or /color setting, what this does is basically allows you to change all the colors in the image. When you select the drop down arrow for the HSL/color tool, you begin to see all the colors that are in, or normally the primary colors and secondary colors that come with the image. Basically, these are just the rainbow colors. So you can see here you have the red. What you can do, you can begin to increase the red, decrease the red. You can see how moving the slider changes the red on the back of the fish. As I said, you don't want it to look unrealistic, so we're not going to be doing much with that setting. So you might be wondering what the HSL on the image is for. HSL is basically hue, saturation, and luminance. What the hue tool does is that it changes the tone of each color separately. What the saturation does, it increases the vibrance of each color on its own as well. What luminance does is that you can change how the color looks. So if you want your dark blue to look more like a cyan or a sky blue, then you use the luminance tool for that. Next, we have split toning. What the split toning tool does is that it changes your highlights and your shadows in an image. Let's say you take a picture in downtown Toronto and it's dark and it's a bit shadowy, or you can see light coming off from some blue buildings or blue lights coming from a cafe or something. Then you begin to see that all the shadows that are overcasting your image begins to have this blue tone to the image. What you can use the split toning tool to do is that you change how those shadows and how those highlights look in the image. We're not going to be touching that, this is just a fish. For the detail panel, you begin to really get into the nitty-gritty of the image. You can begin to adjust how soft your image looks, how sharp it is, how much of the pimples you want to reduce in the image. Those with the detail panel, you'll begin to get really specific. With the lens correction, these are basically how, when you've taken your image, based on how your camera lens took it, you can begin to adjust certain settings if you don't like what the lens of the camera did. For the transform tool, this is what you use to transform your image. You begin to reshape the image, you begin to decrease certain parts of the image. If you want to crop the image, if you want to change the warp or distort the image, then you use the transform tool for that. For the effects panel, you begin to use this for the vignette. What the vignette is just basically darkening of the circular or diameter of your image. Let's give an example. For what the vignette does, you can use the vignette to increase it. It changes the diameter of the image, so you begin to see a bit more darkness if you turn it down, or a bit more brightness if you increase it. But we're not going to be touching that. As I said, this is just a fish. You do not want to go all out on the fish. For the collaboration tool, this basically does what the HSL and color tool does, but on a more very subtle level. If you want to increase or decrease the color of the red on the image like I'm doing here, then you can do that. If you want your fish to be a bit more orangey, you increase it based on the hue. As I said, the hue controls the tone of the color. You can change the red to a bit more orange tone if you want to do that. This is just a fish. We're not adjusting that panel. You can use the same collaboration tool to change the color of the green. As you can see, it does pretty much the same thing as the HSL/color tool. Same thing here for the blue. If I want to change the blue in the image, remember the blue is coming from the reflection in the sky. If I increase the hue towards a more purple, it's going to change the blue in the reflection for the reflection of the water to a purple. We're not touching that. This is just a fish. Okay. So if you want to go and select these settings and tweak them to how you best see the image looking for you, you can definitely go ahead and do that. This is just a fish. I'm okay with how the image looks. If you want to go ahead and make minor settings, you can go ahead with that. This is what the image was before, and this is the after of the image. If you want to change it, that's all about you. What I did was I basically changed the white balance for the picture so you can see a bit more of the reflection of the blue in the sky and more of the green or the coral reef in the bottom of the water. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with this picture, and I'm fine with how it looks. If you want to change the picture, then by all means go ahead. Next picture, when you look down this side, you can see all the other pictures that you imported. So if you want to move on from that picture, you just select the next picture that you want to edit. Here we have a picture of a female model. Basic settings, you can go back to library and you can basically set the starting point for what you want the image to look like. There I'm going to increase the exposure. I'm going to change the white balance to auto so the colors will be a bit more rich, and I'm not adjusting the vibrance too much. I can do that in the develop option. I'm okay with what I did here. I'm going to move on to the develop option, and I'm going to tweak around with the basic settings just a little bit. Here we have the temperature of the image. I want to decrease the blues so the blue on the background would pop a bit more, and I'm okay with that here. I already touched the exposure in the library model. You don't have to touch it again, but if you want to go ahead and increase the exposure a bit more, you're fine to do that. For this section, I don't usually use the settings that much. First thing I do is that I correct the colors of the image, and then I go ahead and then change the saturation and tweak my highlights and my shadows and my whites and my black just a bit. So the first thing that I always do is that I touch the saturation tool just to pop the colors that I'm seeing in my image. As you can see, as I start to bring the saturation tool up, the colors in my image starts to bring a bit more life to them, and that's what I want when I'm making my image. Here I want to increase the clarity just so that certain parts of my image would be a bit more clear. If I increase the black tool, it's going to sort of wash out the blacks in the image, and I'm not doing it to an extent where I lose the tone of the black woman here. I'm keeping her melanin rich, so I'm keeping that there. I'm not touching the whites too much, because if I do that, if I decrease the whites in the image, it's going to decrease the white in her eyes, and it's going to decrease the white in the background. I want to keep the blue and the white for the sky as rich as I possibly can. So I'm not going to touch that as much. But what I do is that I touch the highlights tool to give it a bit more enrichment. And that's where I stop for all my basic settings. I'm gonna use exposure, tone curve, and really decrease my shadows and my highlights just a bit. You see, I bring this down here. It's basically decreasing sort of what the background is going to look like. And if I go down here, it's going to decrease the shadows that are behind the girl. If I bring it up too much, I'm losing a bit of detail in her face, and I don't want to do that. So I'm keeping it a bit lower, and I'm okay with that. If I go to split toning here, as I said, this controls all the shadows and the highlights in your image. When this picture was taken, it was taken in sort of a light where it was a bit more yellow. So I want to change it so it has a bit more blue tone so that it matches the background. So I use my testing tool here, and I change my settings to a bit more blue. Not sure about, because it's conflicting with the background just a bit. Okay, I'm fine here. It's sort of from midway between the aqua and the sky blue, and I'm okay with that. Next, I want to change details in the image. So I'm going to increase my sharpening slider here just to make the image a bit more sharp. I'm going to increase my noise reduction tool here. What the noise reduction tool does is that it changes sort of the shadows and the pimples that are in the image. So watch me move the slider, noise reduction slider, up, and watch how it changes a bit of the details that are in the model's face. Just watch. Noise reduction turning up. Just a bit more. See, it changes sort of the details that was in the image. And if you want to see what your image looks like before and after, you can select this YY tool in the option bottom left here. Just click YY. It's going to show you the before and the after of the image, and you can look at these and compare them and see how the image is going to look to its extremities. So I think I'm okay with this picture here. Next, I'm going to move on to my next model. Go ahead, select the next picture in the bottom. This picture was already edited, but I thought that I could have done just a bit more with the image. So I'm going to change my white balance to auto. Turn on my exposure just a bit more, just like 2 inches. And bringing down my highlights, bringing up my blacks. And I'm gonna increase the saturation so the colors of the image pop just a bit more. When you're moving these sliders, try to make your image look as realistic as possible, if that's the image that you're aiming for. I'm gonna go down to my HSL tool. I'm gonna sort of decrease the blue that are in the jeans of this image. So I'm gonna decrease it just a bit. And you can see how the image of the jean changes color. Next, I'm going to adjust my vignette because I want the image to have sort of a darker diameter around it. And if I want green in my image, I can go ahead and increase the green option. But I don't think I do want any green, so I'm just gonna bring this back down to 0. And I think I'm okay with that image. Yeah, it was already edited, there was not much to do. I can move on to my next picture. Here I have a picture that it looks almost apocalyptical, as if there was a ending coming or an apocalypse. So I have this image here. First thing I want to do in my develop option is to change the white balance to auto, and here it changes the tone of the ground just a bit more to blue, and if I want to increase it to a bit yellow, I increase my temperature of the ground. As I said before, this is kind of an apocalyptical picture, so I want to make it as dark and sort of, you know, near ending as possible. Next, I'm going to decrease my shadows. I'm going to decrease my blacks. And I'm going to increase my vibrance just a bit. Sorry, decrease my vibrance. Decrease my vibrance. Is that vibrance? I'm going to decrease my saturation just a bit. Also, I'm going to go to my effects panel and I'm going to add sort of a vignette, so it can give me a darker diameter around the picture, and that is what I'm trying to accomplish. So this picture looks a bit more world ending like, so I'm okay with that there. Next, I have a picture of a rail track, and this looks perfect just the way it is, but just to see how I can edit it just a bit, I'm gonna go to my collaboration tool and I'm gonna change sort of the blues in the skies just a bit more to be a bit richer, I guess. Not richer, probably. Yeah, I'm loving that. I'm loving that. Look at the before and after for this. Kind of really brings out the rust in the railway track, and I like how that is. This video is almost reaching 30 minutes. I'm gonna be ending in just a few minutes. Same thing for the saturation in the HSL panel. I'm just gonna increase my blues just a bit more, and just to bring out the richness in the sky. And for my red, if I want to increase the rust, I just bring up my reds just a bit more. You can see there's a bit of a green grass in the corner here. It looks a bit pale, but that's okay. It just brings out the theme of the whole image, that the railroad has been there for a very long time. But let's just bring up the greens just to see what it looks like. Not much of a difference, but I'm okay with that. Yep. And that's basically what I'm gonna be stopping for. That's my fish image. That's the image of the girl. Wait, I'm gonna show you the before and after. Before and after for the fish. Before and after for the girl. Before and after for Mari. Before and after for the world ending picture. Before and after for the railroad. And then, when we're done with all that editing and we want to export all these pictures, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be selecting this grid panel in the corner here that says grid view. We're going to select it. Then we're going to select Ctrl A to highlight all our pictures. We're going to click export, and we're going to select the folder in which we want to export all these images. I created a folder on my desktop called Lightroom Pics. I'm going to select that folder and I'm going to export all those pictures into that folder. And up here you're going to be seeing it says exporting 8 files. When the export is finished, you can go ahead to find your folder and see where the pictures have been sent to. See, all my pictures that I've exported are there. And that's basically your Lightroom tutorial for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to see your amazing pictures soon. I'll be sending you the invoice later. Bye.